Well, I want to dive right in today because I got a lot to talk about. We got a lot to uncover for you today, but I want to take you into this worldview, this picture of a young pastor named Timothy. Paul the Apostle is writing to his young pastor friend, and he writes this: Timothy, I thank God for you. Are there people in your life you're thankful to God for? Okay, once again, it's going to be a fun service. Hey, yeah. If you're with your spouse, you better be, yes, I'm so grateful. Okay, thank you. He says, the God I serve with a clear conscience, just as my ancestors did. Paul is painting a picture of a spiritual concept called spiritual contact tracing. We've all heard about contact tracing, right? It's where you figure out how you got infected and you trace back and you trace forward. Well, I think there's a greater contact tracing we need to look at, and it's spiritual contact tracing. Who impacted and influenced our lives? Paul said, I have a clear conscience because I serve God just as my ancestors did. He's rewinding. Night and day, I constantly remember you in our prayers. Pastor Mary and I pray for you guys all the time. I long to see you again, for I remember the tears as we parted. And I will be filled with joy again when we're together. How many of you, when we came back to church, you were filled with joy? Like there was something just about being together. It says, I remember your genuine faith. Listen to this. For you share the faith that first filled your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice. Paul was showing Timothy, your faith was not your own seed. Your seed was sown from somebody else into your life. I want you to think about your life right now. Who sowed seeds into you? Was it your grandma? Was it your grandfather? Was it a pastor? Was it a leader? Was it a parent? Who has been sowing spiritual seeds into your life? Because I think if we trace back and we spiritually contact trace, we'll realize there's been a lot of impact people have made in their lives. Paul goes on to say this, and I know the same faith continues strong in you. In other words, I could trace it back to your mother and grandmother, but I also see it evident in your life. This is why I remind you to fan into flames the spiritual gift God gave you when I laid hands on you. What the Apostle Paul was saying, it's important to trace backwards to see the original seeds, but it's also important to trace forward at the seeds you're about to sow. I think many of us, it's easy to look back, but it's a lot harder to look forward. Paul is showing Timothy there were 3 generations of faith. Grandmother, mother, and now Timothy. He traced it back to his foundation because I've learned this. Every seed has a source. Every seed has a source. Everything sowed into your life has a source. Can you trace your spiritual life back to some seed, some foundation, some person, some moment in your life, some church service you were gathered at? I think all of us probably could trace it to something. So I want to do something with you guys today. Would you be all right if I spiritually contact trace my spiritual journey with God with you guys? Okay, once again, this is going to be a tough service. Guys, we're here all day, so you better get used to interacting today. Anybody want to see my spiritual contact trace? Okay, thank you. I know you guys watching online definitely do, right? But I want to look at my life. So here's me. I'm the green guy. Mary, my wife, is the pink lady, and we'll get to her in a minute, but I want to trace my spiritual journey backwards just a little bit. I want to look back at where the seeds were sown in my past into who I am today. Tracking with me? Yeah. So I have to look back and look and say, my mother, Judy Bishop, she invested and sowed seeds into me spiritually. How did she do that? She made me go to church. It wasn't optional. She didn't allow any of her children to sit with pastor sheets and sister pillows at Church of the Living Sleep. It literally was, you're going to church. And we didn't go to church just on Sunday. Oh, no. We're a Pentecostal church growing up. We went to church Sunday morning and Sunday night and Monday prayer meeting and Tuesday Bible study and Wednesday youth group and Thursday they gave us off and then Friday we're back to youth group and Saturday morning prayer service and then we started all over again. Now as a child, I was pretty, get a life. Now I look back and say, she had a life, I was still looking for mine. She knew what her priority was. It was Jesus. Let me tell you this too. Mom didn't let us play sports on Sunday. Football game? No. Tell your coach you can't go. Mom, I gotta go to the game. No, you can't play. Why? Because Jesus matters more. So I missed many football games that took place on a Sunday when I was playing Pop Warner because we put a priority of Jesus. Back then, I didn't see what she was sowing into me, but now today I'm like, man, I'm so thankful. She set my priority right. Sunday is God's day. It's God's day. So it's her, but then I got to look and I've got to say, well, Judy had to have her foundation from somewhere. And I trace it back to my grandmother, Genevieve Janik. I trace it back to her, Genevieve Skarapinski, but then when she got married to my grandfather, Genevieve Janik, I trace it back to her because in 1970, her and my grandfather owned a bar in Buffalo, New York. She gave her life to Jesus. You know what she did? She sold the bar. Well, this is going to be a tough service if you guys don't catch on. The less you clap, the longer I preach. Here's what she does. She sells the bar, and she goes and becomes a seamstress. My grandfather was working on the railroad, and they got rid of the bar. Here's what they said. We don't want any of the stuff that would keep us from Jesus holding us onto Jesus. Pretty bold statement. Today we're like, wow, a sip of beer is coming to church. Now I know who's been doing that. Okay, so it starts, Judy goes to Jen. I look and say, man, thank God, 1970, my grandmother came to faith in Christ. My mother came to faith in about 1973. That was the year I was born. 2 years later, my parents got divorced because my mother became a born again. Okay, so think about this. But I trace it back. There's a lineage here. But it wasn't just there. When my mother got saved, she wanted to make sure her kids were in church. Okay, that's why church is important. So she sent us to Evangel Assembly of God in Williamsville, New York, just outside of Buffalo. Went there was a Italian Pentecostal church. What that simply means is 3 hours, they're just getting started. Went to Evangel Assembly of God. I hated the services. I really did. They were way too long. Didn't seem like it was relevant to me. That's why we do what we do today. I went there, though, but I was introduced to two people that were instrumental in my spiritual upbringing. The first was my youth pastor, John Sotero. John Sotero was a bodybuilder. Huge guy, good-looking guy, and as he got older, things fell down. It just wasn't the same. But I would go work out with him. He would work out with a skinny little heavy metal head, and I'd go exercise with him, and it was John Sotero planting seeds in my life. He became like a spiritual father to me. He was sowing seeds into my life. I could trace it back to John Sotero, who I am today, and why I became a youth pastor in the beginning of my ministry was John Sotero. Okay? Then I could look back and I could say, well, it wasn't just Pastor John. Incidentally, we have the best youth pastor in all of Long Island and the Northeast here in Dupree Wells. Okay? And the best children's pastor, Dana, which is awesome what they do. So you go here, and I could trace also back to a lady named Sheila Renninger. Who is Sheila Renninger? She was my Sunday school teacher. She made going to church a joy. I didn't understand the stories that were being told in church, but Sheila made it make sense. Plus, she brought candy as well. So that always got me into Sunday school class. But I can look back there in her example, her and her husband, George. What an incredible leader. George just passed away not too long ago. But what an example of a godly marriage. Young people need to see a godly marriage. I needed to see that growing up because I grew up in dysfunction. They had all that. She prayed for me. She'd call me during the week. It wasn't just Sunday school to her. It was lifestyle with her. She wanted to make sure that Todd was okay. And all the students in that class, about 20, 25 students that were in those classes when we were there. So I go there. I'm an evangel. Now I grow up. I graduate. I go to Bible college, seminary, and I find my way to Central Bible College in Springfield, Missouri. I used to call it Springfield misery. That's what it felt like. And I went to Central Bible College. My first year, I almost got kicked out. True story. But there was a guy that became instrumental in my formation as a pastor. It's a guy by the name of Gary Brugman. Gary Brugman was the dean of students at the time. And when I was getting in trouble my first year, because I was only a Christian for about 7 months before I went to Bible college, and so I still had some things rough around the edges. And so he literally said, when they wanted to kick me out, he literally said, no, I see potential in this young man. I'm standing here today because someone said, I'm not letting him, there's something more there. So as you can see, in my early days, I could trace it to my mother, my grandmother. I could trace it up the lineage at my church that we started growing up and in Bible college. But then I graduate from Bible college. And I go into ministry, and it's literally like ministry's hard. It's not get up here and speak. This is easy. Dealing with people is hard. I've said this for many years. My job would be great if it wasn't for people. Ministry's tough. The first church I worked at was a very small church. I became the senior pastor. I should have never been that person. They put me in this position. I became the senior pastor, and I was ready to quit the ministry. I was done. I said, no way. I'm going to go sell cars. I'll do anything else but ministry. No one told me it would be like this. I was cursed out by board members. I could go down a list, cut salaries, all the things. I couldn't even live. I was staying in a small apartment. My car would break down. Didn't even have the money to get it fixed. It was a very difficult start to ministry for me. I quit after 9 months. It's one of the only things I ever quit. In that process, there was a guy that came around me. His name's Pat Hilke. Pat Hilke was a local pastor. And he would always encourage me. Todd, don't give up. We'd play basketball together every week. He'd say, don't give up. Keep going. God's got something in store for you. Don't quit, don't quit, don't quit. I see it, I see it, I see it, I see it, I see it. The reason I didn't quit when I first went into ministry was Pat Hilke. I'm thankful for Pastor Pat Hilke, because without him, I wouldn't be here today, and you wouldn't be here today. Traces back to this moment where I felt like quitting. And then I needed to say, well, where do I go from here? How do I keep in ministry? I now quit my church. Well, there's this other guy here, Paul Bartholomew. He took a risk on a single youth pastor. He hired me at 23 years old as a youth pastor. So listen, I need you to be my youth pastor. I said, you don't need a youth pastor. You got 4 kids. Get a volunteer. About 4 years later, that youth group was about 100 students in a church of 150 kids, 150 adults. Paul Bartholomew I quote often because he became like a spiritual father to me. There's a quote I use very often. Truth is like the lion. It needs no defense but itself. That's from Paul Bartholomew. I learned about the tachyon and quantum physics from Paul Bartholomew, who had multiple doctorates and master's degree. He was smarter than, he forgot more than I ever studied. So, but I learned that from him. But he gave me an opportunity. Gave me a start. And I'm so grateful as I trace back, and I could keep going and going. I could go to the moment where God called me down here to Long Island. And then I came in touch with this beautiful young lady named Mary Elizabeth Martinez Torres. And then, after we got married, we contact traced. I'm just kidding. Okay, anyway. So here we are. We find each other. Sorry, guys. Sometimes you just don't know. But I still love you. I hope you still love me. So Mary and I, we get married, right? My beautiful Puerto Rican princess from Queens. And we get married, and I never realized, I always heard this growing up, but when you get married, you marry the family. Come on, for the people in the back. True story, isn't it? And so Mary got the worst end of the deal on this one. I got the really good end. So I didn't just gain a father-in-law and mother-in-law, I gained a father and mother. I could trace back, and I could look at Mary's life, and I'm so grateful for a wife whose parents invested in the spiritual life of their daughter. Made sure she was in church, made sure that she had a good foundation. They would gather around the dining room table. They'd talk about God. They'd talk about the Bible. They had many of those conversations. And because of that seed that was sowed into Mary, now us together, we're sowing seeds now into Malachi, Abigail, and Bethany. Now think about this. As you go through and you start saying, well, here I am as a parent. Now I get to sow seeds forward. People were sowing seeds into me, into Mary, and now we have an opportunity to sow seeds forward into other people. I wonder what 20 years from now our contact tracing would look like when people 20 years from now look back on our lives. Will they be able to see all the ways we impacted people, encouraged people, and lifted people? But not only Malachi, Abigail, and Bethany, who I believe and pray every day, may they be God's voice to their generation. I declare Luke 2:52 over their lives. May they grow in wisdom and stature, finding favor with God and with man. So I'm believing that they're going to continue. But not only that, I think about the influence that God has given me locally, not just at our church, but at Long Island University, LIU. Who would have ever thought that at 46 years old, I would be doing campus ministry? I meet with students all the time. I not only now do a Bible study for student athletes, but now I do a Bible study for students as well. Come on now. But that is not just the students. I trickle down. I have spiritual children as a result of that. I've led 25 football players to Jesus. 25. 2 female field hockey players. One of which, I don't know, is she still serving back there? Michaela, we love you and we're so proud of you. So awesome. So I look at that and I look at the seeds that are sowed and it just keeps going. Then I look at, and I had to leave this for last, Church Unleashed. I mean, if Pastor Mary and I did not get that desire from God to plant this church nearly 13 years ago, none of us would have known each other. We would not have seen nearly 3,000 people give their lives to Jesus since the very beginning of our church. When you look and now you say there are spiritual children all over this room, even in this service, whose life has been transformed because of Church Unleashed. It's crazy. And see, our ultimate goal is for all of us, for Church Unleashed, to create its own contact trace. For us at LIU to create its own contact trace. For the spiritual sons and daughters that we reach with the gospel. For my children. For all of us to begin to say, how can I pay it forward to somebody else? How can I sow seeds into the future? Because if we stop where we're at, I think we're actually a little bit less of good stewards of what God's blessed us with. See, I learned every seed has a source. And as I go back and I look, and this could be so much bigger, I'm thankful for the seeds that people sowed into my life. Forever changed my life. I'm grateful for people like Melinda, who came here not too many months ago, and God sowed a seed into your life. Now she's one of the spiritual daughters of this house. She's given her life to Christ, got baptized, life transformed. Your daughter, Kristen. I can go to Alex. I can go to so many different people in this room whose life has been transformed just because of the influence and contact tracing of Church Unleashed. See, the spiritual contact tracing is much more important than physical contact tracing. I'm not saying it's not important, but I'm saying spiritual contact tracing is how you look back to see how you got where you are today. You did not get here on your own. Come on, somebody. You got here because someone else sowed seed into you. Someone had to initiate it. Someone had to introduce you to it. It did not just happen. When's the last time you did some spiritual contact tracing? When's the last time you look back on all the people who sowed seeds into your life? Paul took young Timothy on a journey of spiritual contact tracing. He said, your grandmother's faith and your mother's faith is why you are where you are today. Paul said, your faith first filled your grandmother. Billy Graham, one of the greatest evangelists in American history, was introduced to Jesus by a guy named Mordecai Ham. He was an American evangelist. Track with me. Mordecai Ham was led to the Lord by a guy named Billy Sunday, former National League outfielder who got saved, became an evangelist, who was led to the Lord by J. Wilbur Chapman, a Presbyterian evangelist, who was led to the Lord by a gentleman by the name of Dwight L. Moody, who was an American evangelist, but also a publisher, who was led to the Lord by a Sunday school teacher named Edward Kimball. When you look at Billy Graham and you trace back, you go to a Sunday school teacher that no one ever knew, that was never famous, that never preached a sermon, but yet impacted a generation of pastors and leaders and evangelists. So the seeds you sow, what you sow will always grow. And when you sow the right seeds in the right places, you get the right results. See, my life, Pastor Mary's life, your life, and our church are where they are because someone else sowed into us. Every seed has a source because you can trace your life back and you'll find God has always been working. He's always been maneuvering. He's always been reshuffling the deck, adjusting things to get you where you are today. It is not an accident you're at Church Unleashed today. It's not an accident. It's not an accident you're part of this church family. Every contact you have with someone leaves a trace of something on that person. Every contact you have with someone leaves a trace of something. I want to make sure that the trace that I leave with people is nothing more, nothing less than Jesus Christ. That when I rub shoulders with someone, they get a little bit of Jesus. When I'm at the grocery store, they get a little bit of Jesus. When we're giving out food and we're helping the hurting, the hopeless, and the helpless, we are rubbing shoulders and giving them a trace of Jesus. See, and that's why you have to make sure that what you're living for is worth leaving on someone else. Let me say it again. What you're living for is worth leaving on someone else. Paul continued when he said this, that is why I want to remind you to fan into flames the spiritual gift God gave you. In other words, your faith will continue to burn bright so people will be able to see it. See, it's not just about tracing backward, it's about also tracing forward. What do you want to leave on people? How will your life leave a trace of Jesus on all the people you come in contact with? And that's what our church has been trying to do for the last 9 months during this pandemic. We want to leave a trace of Jesus on people. There's a recent study that was done by the American Family Study. It said 47% of Americans say church was prepared for the pandemic. Seems pretty good, right? 47% of Americans say churches were ready. But the problem is it's about the same number for state and local governments as well as the federal government. So it was pretty flatline there. Here's the harder statistic. 23% of Americans say the church was actually helpful during the pandemic. That's lower than state and federal, and that's lower than local, state, and federal governments. I'm glad they can't say that about Church Unleashed, let me tell you. We were in the trenches. We were making sure we were providing people, helping people financially, helping people that were hurting. That's why we purchased multiple semi-trucks to distribute food all over Long Island, because we knew people were hurting. We knew people needed help, and it was not enough to just pray about it. How you doing? Just pray about it. No, sometimes you got to actually act on your prayers. Sometimes you got to be the answer to your own prayers. Sometimes you just got to do it. It's a great slogan, just do it. I think I should copyright that. And for 9 weeks, the first 9 weeks of the pandemic, we fed people every Wednesday. Hundreds of people came through, and we fed people, no questions asked. Get whatever meal they wanted to get. We also helped stock several food pantries, partner with local organizations, help churches that were making an impact during this pandemic. See, I think Church Unleashed represents the very best of the best when it comes to church. And I'm not saying that because we're just the pastors of the church. I'm saying that because of the people of the church. You are a radically generous, Jesus-loving, devil-stomping group of people who want to simply love people to life. I want to introduce to you the most challenging mission objective our church has ever started. And here's the good news. I already committed to it. Oops, I did it again. It's another great, we should write a song about that. There's a community in Guatemala. And so we will be adopting a village in Guatemala. Can we put that aerial footage up there? Plan de Avila. We're going to be adopting that whole entire village. It's about 40 miles south of Guatemala City. Why is this important to do? Because it's a community of only about 175 people. They have no hospitals, no medical service. They struggle for clean water. Half the homes do not have toilets. Think about this. The things that we often take for granted. They have one little church. Can we show that one little church? Yeah, right here. The little church right here is an Assembly of God church. It's the same organization that we're partnered with. We didn't know that when we adopted this village. How great is that? So talk about how God orchestrates things. The average income is $2.50 per day. Per day. Just let that sink in for all you Starbucks lovers. $2.50 a day. Nearly everyone in that community lives in extreme poverty. They have limited access to clean water, all those things that we often take for granted. Their school is in disrepair. There's their school right there. Here's the road to get to their school. Here's the bridge you have to cross right here. The bridge you have to cross is about 30 feet in the air over a river. And it's missing planks, and the wood is falling apart. But we're going to make a difference there. So let me tell you how we're going to make a difference. You ready for what we're going to do? Remember, extreme poverty in this community. Here's where we come in. We're going to be providing a school feeding program. Every day, every child will be fed in that community by Church Unleashed. Pretty awesome. We're going to install clean water filtration in every home. It's pretty good. We're going to also help remodel the school. We're going to put proper toilets in every school. We're in the school there. We're going to actually install toilets in every home in that community. Not only that, but we're going to partner with the church there, and we're going to help remodel that entire church and give them everything they need. So that's going to cost us, for the next 3 years, about in excess of $100,000. That's a big commitment. But we're a generous church. And I look at it this way. When I reached out to this organization and said, I want to help a community, I want to help an area, they said, this is the one that needs it the most. So you know where you send Church Unleashed? Where God is needed the most. You know where you send people like us that are radically generous? Where it's needed the most. You know where we put our money to invest in people? Where it's needed the most. And so we at Church Unleashed have already committed to this. So you're going to have to help me out with the end of year offering. It's just true. Because we're doing this if it's a small group of us or all of us working together. But that's only one of many of the goals that we're working on. Another group we've been working with that's very important, this group right here, this couple that we've been working with for years now has become good friends of our church. They're in a country we can't even tell you where they're at because their life could be required of them, or at least imprisoned in a country not American with no embassy. Let me give you a little video of the story of the Stookies. Hey, Church Unleashed. I'm really excited to be sitting with this incredible missionary couple. Tell us where you're from, where you're heading back to, a little bit about yourself.
Well, we are Chris and Cindy Stookie. We are from Massachusetts, and we are workers over on a little island off the east coast of Africa.
We're part of the Live Dead initiative, And in a nutshell, what that is planting churches among unreached people groups through teams.
Now, the place you're at, there's a large percentage population that's Muslim. What is that percentage?
Our island is about 99% Muslim.
Muslim. Can you tell us the story of your friend that we just saw that picture of?
Sure.
Yes. So a friend of ours, born and raised Muslim, within the last year, made a decision to follow Jesus, and he did follow through with that. He confessed Jesus as Lord and Savior. He was water baptized, and that's the wonderful part of the story. But he's faced a lot of persecution since that time. When he returned home, he found his older brother there, who told him he could not any longer live in the family home, so he had to find another place to live. He was no longer married to his wife, who was pregnant at the time, and since that time, his wife miscarried their child. She mysteriously died as well, his wife. So our friend, who we nicknamed Charlie, has been through a lot. So if you would remember to pray for Charlie, God knows who that is. It would be very helpful to him. But he's staying very steadfast and strong in his faith.
All because he made a decision for Christ.
That's right. Yeah, he decided to follow Jesus, and he was set free. He literally, his countenance changed. He's just full of the joy of the Lord, and he has suffered a lot of hardship and a lot of sadness. And so you can see there's kind of a balance between the sadness that he carries, but the joy of the Lord in him as well.
Now, the language is Swahili.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Can you sing for all of us?
Sure.
I've decided to follow Jesus in Swahili.
Sure.
Indio. Yeah. Ready?
Nimeamua kumfuata Yesu. Nimeamua kumfuata Yesu. Nimeamua kumfuata Yesu. Sitarudi.
So now this guy, Charlie, can now spiritually trace his story back to the Stookies, where they went to a country that they can't tell you the location of publicly. It's 99% Muslim, and they're converting them one person at a time. That's what you're giving to. That's what we're living for, is the radical transformation of people's lives. See, the Stookies are leaving much more than a trace on people. They're leaving life change on people. They're leaving new joy on people and new hope on people. And that's what Church Unleashed is all about. In fact, in 2020, we gave away to missions and outreach about $171,000. $171,000. In the middle of a global pandemic, Church Unleashed said, no, we are not going to stop being radically generous. We're going to continue to help those who are hurting and struggling and challenged, and we're going to do it in great, great ways. I mean, think about what God has done in and through our church. Let me just give you really quick 3 bullets. I'm going to hit these really quick. How you can actually impact people's lives. Number 1, understand this. A trace of Jesus is all it takes to change someone's life. A trace of Jesus. All you need is a little trace of Jesus. Is there anybody in this room that is thankful that someone put a little bit of Jesus on you? Is there anybody that's grateful? Man, thank you for that grandparent, that parent, that family member, that Sunday school teacher, that person that invested in me. My life is forever changed because of the people that sowed seeds into my life. There was a Methodist preacher in 1832. He preached a powerful message this one evening. Many people came to faith in Christ. But there was this one girl who gave her life to Jesus, who went home and then led her brother, Robert Eaglin, to the Lord. Who's Robert Eaglin? Most people wouldn't know the name. Robert Eaglin was the most influential person to lead a young man by the name of Charles Hayden Spurgeon to the Lord. Most of us would know him as C.H. Spurgeon, who was one of the most well-known, respected preachers of the 19th century that traveled the world. It was an unknown man, Robert Eagland. But it goes back to a young girl, his sister, who led him to the Lord. It was a leper that approached Jesus. He says this, "If you're willing, Jesus, you can heal me and make me clean." The Bible declares, "Move with compassion." Jesus reached out and touched him. Jesus broke the laws of his day to touch somebody with some healing. Said this, "I am willing." And as the Messiah reached out and touched this leper, he was healed. One trace of Jesus can change someone's life. One trace of Jesus' words. One trace of Jesus' presence. One trace of Jesus' power. See, the end of year offering and today is going to allow us to give traces of Jesus to people we will never meet. That years from now, young children in Guatemala will have clean water and toilets and a great school and a great church because us at Church Unleashed, we are going to give sacrificially. The world needs Jesus. They'll look back and say, thank God they sowed into us from America. A trace of Jesus is all it takes to change someone's life. Second, realize life is never measured by what you gain, but by what you give. I mean, that's just a fact. Jesus said it this way. I think he's a good guy to listen to. Said it's better to give than to receive. Isn't it interesting? The words of Jesus don't even get applause in God's house. It is better to give than to receive. Why? Because Jesus understands there's more joy in the giving than the receiving. You see, we measure success today by how much money we have in our bank account, or the kind of car we drive, or the home we live in. That's all about acquiring. I'm going to acquire. But heaven measures success differently. Heaven measures success by how many people we help, and how many seeds we sow, and who we reach with God's love. Heaven measures success by investing. See, the world system is acquiring. The word system is investing. Mother Teresa said this, intense love does not measure, it just gives. How intensely do you love people? Then we just give. See, the world's all about gaining, but the church is all about giving. In fact, it stems from our very God who said, or the word says, for God so loved, he hoarded. Oh no, doesn't say that. No, for God so loved, no, it doesn't say he hoarded. For God so loved, he acquired. For God so loved, he decided to build a sauna for all the believers in heaven that get there. For God so loved, he said, well, we minister to LIU football students at Church Unleashed. Let's give them a football field. No, for God so loved, gave. What did he give? He gave his son to the world so that you and I could experience his love as we trace back. Life is never measured by what you gain, by what you give. And lastly, we've got to all learn to live for something bigger than ourselves. This is the one I have to remind myself of often. Come on now. Because living for Todd Bishop is the natural drive for all of us, right? Fill in your own name. I got to live for myself. I got to wait 24 hours online at GameStop to get my kid a game that in 2 years, we'll be honest, I got to do all this stuff. I got to run here and I got to go crazy. I got to do all this stuff. Wait, listen, there's a point. I guess, no, you know what? If my kids don't get what they want this year, there are kids in Guatemala that would love just a pair of socks for Christmas. I'm sorry. I'm just being real. We'll sow seeds more into entertainment than we will evangelism. Thank you for a one-hand clap and a... See, living for me, I fight against that all the time. But I have to remind myself, I don't live for Todd Bishop. I'll be honest, I don't live for Mary either. I don't live for my kids. I live for Jesus. That's who I live for. And if I live for him, my wife will be taken care of. If I live for him, my kids will be taken care of. Everything they need, everything that God will provide it. I can't live for me. Come on, say that loud and proud. I don't live for me. Ooh, doesn't that rub against your human nature just a little bit? We've all got to choose to live for something bigger than ourselves. What does that mean? Simply means you have to live for something that will outlive and outlast you. What is that? It's the mission of Jesus Christ. That's what outlasts us all. What is the mission of Jesus Christ? Jesus said it, his words again. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those that are lost. That's the mission of Jesus. And his mission must be our mission. It must be the reason we wake up in the morning. It's not so, man, I get to go to work at a 9 to 5. No, as I go to work, who can I tell about Jesus? As I go to the grocery store, who do I get to leave a trace of Jesus on? As I'm at the mechanic shop, who do I get to tell about the love of Jesus? If it's just about going from A to B, we're just like the world. In the middle of our A to B journeys, we got to be able to say, God, interrupt my journey with a divine appointment that'll transform and leave a trace of you on somebody that needs it. Scripture declares this, go out into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge anyone you find to come, so the house will be full. Pastor Mary and I, we live so that God's house, I'm not talking about Church Unleashed, I'm talking about God's house is full. Our team, our staff, our pastors, we live so that God's house will be full. And this church, we did not launch Church Unleashed nearly 13 years ago so we could all sit on our derrieres and have a Bless Me Club. We started this church so we can plunder hell and populate heaven. We started this church so the lost could be found, the broken could be restored, those who have been forgotten could be remembered. We started this church to leave an impression on people, to leave a trace of Jesus. I could trace back my spiritual formation all the way back to my grandmother, 1970, who gave her life to Jesus, sold her bar, and followed Christ. And I saw how she impacted my mother and how my mother impacted me. 20 years from now, 2040, I want people across the world to trace back their relationship with Jesus, the Church Unleashed. I want them to look back and say, it was those crazy Americans that sowed seeds all over the world to make a difference in people's life. Let's be the church that lives for something bigger than ourselves as we leave a trace of Jesus wherever we go.